India has received some more good news. The UNDP's report on multidimensional poverty says 140 million Indians have been pulled out of poverty in India since, or rather in the last 15 years. According to the report, India's multidimensional poverty fell by 140 million between 2015 and 16 and 2019 and 2021 as compared to a decline of 275 million between 2005 and 6 and 2015 and 16. The Global Multidimensional Poverty Index looks beyond income as a measurement of poverty to understand how people experience poverty in different aspects of their daily lives. The UNDP said it is clear that multiple policy actions and schemes underpin the improved results in India. This comes after the IMF says that India is likely to be the top third economy of the world in the next 5 years, and it continues to be the fastest growing economy. Let's take a look at these findings by, or rather at the UNDP report. The UNDP report, of course, showing that India has done rather well when it comes to tackling poverty. Now, this report comes, of course, in the background of another report which said that in the Global Hunger Index, India stood rather high and did extremely poorly, even worse than Sri Lanka and Pakistan. There's certainly a dichotomy there. How do we read these reports? What does it really mean for India, for the future of India, and of course when it comes to poverty alleviation? Let's open this up for a very special discussion with a panel of guests, starting with Sharad Kohli, senior economist, Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, Madhav Nalapad, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, Joyita Basu, editor of the Sunday Guardian. I welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, on the broadcast. Starting first of all, with you, Madhav sir. How do you read this latest UNDP report which has come? Certainly an extremely good news for India when it comes to poverty alleviation, especially under the Modi government. When we speak of multidimensional poverty, there of course have been a large number of people, 140 million Indians according to this report, who have been pulled out of poverty in the last 15 years.
Well, opinions may lie, but facts do not lie. And the reality is there have been a lot of opinions about India. And when people come to India and they don't see any of these opinions as reality, for example, opinions of mass violence and various other horrible stories that newspapers across the world, some of them, are filled with. The reality is that when, in India, there has definitely been steady progress. There's no question about it. And from, Prime Minister Modi has from the very beginning concentrated on economic development and economic growth. He's put a lot of focus on that, exactly, the way P.V. Narasimha Rao did in the past. And Lal Bahadur Shastri also attempted to do in the very brief time that he was the Prime Minister. I'd like to say that from the very beginning, Prime Minister Modi has focused on the poorest elements of society. And he has looked at trying to ensure that they get a living standard of life, a standard of life that is not, the kind of privation and poverty that they've been used to across so many centuries, if I may say so, not only decades, but centuries. So that effort is definitely paying off. You can see that in the program for trying to give universal healthcare coverage. You can see that in the program of giving food grains, a certain amount of food grains to families.
Yeah.
All that, and you can see very importantly, direct benefit transfer. You can see money going right into the bank accounts of the poorer people. Banks are no longer turning away individuals who say, oh, we don't have that much of money. They say, yes, even if you have no money, you're welcome. And if I may say so, in the private sector, long back there was something called the pygmy deposit of the syndicate bank. And then the syndicate bank used to send people across villages. And they used to collect small sums as deposits. And the success of that was syndicate bank became one of the largest banks in India. So the point is that there has been a conscious effort by Prime Minister Modi to ensure that poverty is ended and that the privations that Indian people have suffered from is being reduced. Now, much more is being done in Modi 2.0, but it's a work in progress. There's no question about it. No one can say that we have reached a level in which we can look back and say, fine, this is enough. We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But the good news is we are moving at a higher and higher speed and in the right direction.
And Gautam Mukherjee, if you could come in here, how do you view this report, especially very interestingly, as I said earlier as well, almost as a dichotomy, standing in a jarring contrast, is the Global Hunger Index, which was released just a day or two ago, which claimed that India was doing rather poorly, even worse when it comes to the hunger index, even worse than countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka. And a day or two later, you have this UNDP report which says millions of people, 140 million to be precise, have been pulled out of poverty in the last 15 years or so.
Yeah. Now, the two reports, the hunger index is done by a pair of rather dubious NGOs, one from Germany and one from Ireland. They claim to have been doing this for 15 years, but they seem to have come to our notice over the last couple. It's a poison pen effort with very narrow focus information and very narrow focus polling of correspondents. Some 2,000-3,000 is all. And they also apparently, they claim, according to the report that they put out, that they have consulted UN, World Bank, etc. sources. Well, if they had, they wouldn't turn out such tripe. As far as this report goes, from the UNDP and their partners, a research outfit in Oxford, it is a very sympathetic report. It has looked at things in a much more holistic as well as intensive manner. They've, for example, defined poverty, as you've rightly pointed out, not just as income, but also standard of living, education, health, housing, water, electricity, and so on, which is precisely the approach that the government of India has taken. Nutrition for lactating mothers, infants, babies, young children. As Professor Nalapat just said, the food the grains, the ration that is being given out to 50 crore people, which is still going on. COVID is hopefully gone, but we're still giving a lot of people, free fruit gains to try and tide them over till the economy comes back in full force. India's raised absolute millions out of poverty. Of course, our problem is that we make millions more, and the numbers are staggering, and will carry on doing so till we reach, we're already the most populous nation in the world. We're going to reach 1.70 billion before it starts to decline. The plus point is that there's a lot of young people between the ages of 15 and 35. Some estimates say 65% of the population. So with the right skilling, I think they could go a long way to carry India up to number 3 position in the world and beyond, from 10 trillion to 30 trillion, as is being projected now. So, I mean, these are dimensions that have never occurred in the same sentence with a mention of India. But today, they're being mentioned almost every day. This is a very new India going to a very new destination, and the poor are going to be lifted up because of this enormous growth, if nothing else.
Yes, I agree with you, sir. It's something to celebrate. DBT, the National Food Security Act, which both of you, Professor Nalapat and you mentioned, certainly is one of the biggest reasons why such a large number of people have been alleviated from the poverty index. But Sharad Kohli, as a senior economist, do you think we are being rather naive when we are completely dismissing the GHI report 2022? Because perhaps, yes, the nomenclature is debatable, whether it's hunger, whether it's malnutrition. But if we look at the four major points, like malnutrition, child stunting, child mortality, etc., which the GHI report has taken into consideration. From 2002 onwards, India has not done very well, and malnutrition is an area where we need to work, and there is a large area which India needs to cover. Is it right at this point of time to completely dismiss that report, calling it orchestrated to sort of dent India's image?
Well, Meenakshi, I must say you're being very kind to the GHI, because I've been calling GHI as Global Hoax Index. GHI Global Hoax Index. I mean, if that was the criteria, Meenakshi, they should not have called it Global Hunger Index. They should have said that we're probably taking child stunting, and so you could have called it Child Development Index or whatever. I think you gave a wrong name, and that is Meenakshi, a categorical, clear case of malicious propaganda against our country. There are elements in the Western world who cannot tolerate India's progress. There are sections in the Western world who cannot see our country overtaking theirs in terms of economy, because they still carry that colonizing mindset, and they can't get out of it for the rest of their life. Anyway, we really don't care. I don't think I need to comment. I already did shows on your channel yesterday.
Okay.
And I thwarted this report left and right. It has got no base, absolutely. Coming down to the UNDP, Meenakshi, there are a couple of things we need to keep in mind. With a very important aspect, which I think we must mention in this discussion, is that this is multidimensional poverty alleviation report. Now, it will be important for our viewers to understand what is the difference between poverty alleviation and multidimensional poverty, because the World Bank criteria says that if you're making $2.15 a day, you are over poverty line. I mean, if you're doing more than that. But the multidimensional criteria, I think UNDP has rightly done, which includes, as Gautam said, it includes sanitation, it includes housing, education, health, lot of things. So I think if we take the overall human development in terms of poverty, is not just about, one could be poor in emotions, one could be poor in sentiments, one could be poor in anything. But I think this poverty is related to your overall standard of living, overall lifestyle. I think it talks about that, and that is where India has made. And here is what has contributed. I feel at the top I would put Manrega, because Manrega is something which is guaranteeing people 100 days in a year. So I think that straight away takes you out of the poverty line which is being fixed. Although I must say here, Meenakshi, that even in India, you got several criterion for who's a poor. Starting from Tendulkar committee report, there were so many reports which defined poverty in different ways.
Correct.
But I think this multidimensional poverty alleviation is the best way to do. Are you having a house? Do you have sanitation? Can your children go to school? Do you get proper food? Now another question: 800 million people availing the benefit of Garib Kalyan Yojana. Somebody asked me, and I would like to draw attention of Professor Nalapat and Gautam as well. Somebody asked me a very pertinent question. If you say you're feeding 800 million people for 2 years, 5 kilos, you say it is Garib Kalyan Yojana. Garib Kalyan means poor. So are you recognizing the fact that 80 crore people in our country are poor? The answer is no. These are the people who can afford, but because of inflation, because of COVID, because of their transitioning into a post-COVID era, this is just a help extended to them so that their family budgets can do a little more than what they can do. They are not 80 crore, all poor people who would starve to death if this 5, I think my co-panelists would agree with me, they wouldn't have died without these 5 kilo, but this 5 kilo of grain is supporting their home budgets, which is a tremendous help at this point of time. So I think, Meenakshi, for me, the big takeaway from this report is the multidimensional poverty alleviation, which is completely different from the World Bank or some of the other committee reports.
All right, and just taking this forward, I agree with all of you. It's a moment to celebrate. Certainly, all the schemes you were mentioning, Garib Kalyan Yojana, DBT, even Manarega, certainly have done a lot. And the correct implementation also has helped with this multidimensional poverty alleviation. But Joyita, just playing the devil's advocate here, 2 days ago we had the Global Hunger Index report, which two of our panelists have completely dismissed. Yes, there are certain aspects of that report which are questionable. The government of the day itself has raised some very serious questions on it. But when it comes to malnutrition, isn't there a lot more which the government needs to do? Perhaps should we take this report also with a pinch of salt and try to find a balance, perhaps strive for even better, because there is a lot more ground which needs to be covered, and that's something which we can't deny.
Meenakshi, first of all, I think it's a misnomer to call it a global hunger report. It's not about hunger, it is actually about nutrition.
Yeah.
So what they should have called it, global nutrition report. Now once we get into that, we have to bring in things like, for example, food habits. I'm certain these people, these people, they have not gone around checking, doing a blood test of every respondent to find out the, potassium, sodium, whatever they have, which kind of anemia, this and that, which decides whether there is enough nutrients, there are enough nutrients or not. I think a lot of this is also decided in terms of food habit. So what exactly is now, say for example, there is a large swathe of our population, maybe 40-45% of our population, which does not consume non-vegetarian food. Now when you are not, so automatically what they are going to say is that if you are not consuming non-vegetarian food, you are suffering, there is a lack of certain minerals in your body. It's a different matter that we Indians, I mean a large part of our army is actually vegetarian. So in spite of that, they are kind of hardier than perhaps their enemies. So when you are, the very fundamental problem is, so these are the problems. What nutrients you are deriving from what food, the kind of nutrient, for example, the dal, lentil can give us, okay. According to Western textbooks or something like that, that may not be always possible. Now, if you are looking at it in terms of say animal protein and all, so all these questions arise. Now, what is the same, because the countries that they have compared us with, they are more or less 99 or perhaps 100% non-vegetarian countries. So consumption of meat and all, it's much more prevalent over there. So I think that's a fundamental problem. They have not taken into consideration food habits. Okay, and number two is that I agree to a large extent that when you are talking about say 3,000 people in a country of 1.4 billion people or 1.3 billion people and say that this country is hungry, that becomes a little too much, because I mean if I am looking at it in terms of say anecdotal evidence, if I am looking at, I mean hunger is, at least it's not visible. It is not there. If you go to the rural areas, if you are in the urban areas, wherever you are, you don't see them, which was once upon a time. We have seen photographs and all of that, maybe in post famine. That is what a hunger situation is like.
Yeah.
So there's a fundamental flaw in how they have computed it, and a lack of understanding of the reality. Even if I do not go into the conspiracy theory of they are against us, or they have done a hatchet job deliberately, even if I give him the benefit of the doubt, I would say it is a very uneducated survey that they have done.
And as far as the Global Hunger Index survey is concerned, it's been dissed by many scholars, including the government of the day. But coming back, of course, to this UNDP report, Professor Nalapad, if you could come in here, I think Sharad Kohli wants to make a point as well. Mostly this is going to be on the GHI. Go ahead.
Just for a minute, I wanted to answer Joyita. The 3,000 people surveyed, Joyita, were the women who were doing Karwa Chauth on that day, and they said they're all hungry.
Yeah, but as far as these NGOs are concerned, the two organizations rather, which did conduct the GHI, they say that it's not based on a certain number of population. This is data which is provided by the government of the day. There are two versions to it. Which version is correct? We will not get into that. But Professor Nalapat, if you could come in here, speaking about this UNDP report, what do you think it means for the future of India, sir? There was a time when malnutrition, hunger was a big problem. It clearly looks like that we're leaving those days behind. 140 million people being pulled out of multidimensional poverty. Of course, it's not only a big achievement, to showcase for the government of the day. It also highlights really how India is developing as a nation, and it's a very holistic and multifaceted development, isn't it, sir?
Meenakshi, I've traveled to UP and Bihar. During about 25, 30 years ago, I've traveled there more recently, and I can tell you there is a change, including in the attitude of the people there. And also in the fact that the people are now much more willing to confront the official machinery and demand the kind of services that the official machinery claims to be giving them and is paid to give them. So this is a very welcome change. You're seen in my home state of Kerala, the quality of life, according to European statisticians, is higher than in most of Europe. But it's not it's not at all a rich state. It's in fact a middle income state. If you look at even in terms of comparing with some other parts of India. The fact is, you need a social infrastructure. You need an education system. You need a health system. Now we have this national education policy.
Yeah.
We have a situation in which schools are being paid attention to. You have various initiatives that are being launched. And I'd only like to say, way back when Narendra Modi was Chief Minister of Gujarat and went to China, and he visited Beijing and Shanghai. Coincidentally, I was there during that time, totally by accident. And I said, this Narendra Modi, CM of Gujarat, is going to be the Deng Xiaoping of India. Deng Xiaoping, don't forget, lifted hundreds of millions of Chinese out of poverty. That same thing is now being done by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And it's done in a very targeted way. It's done through around 40 and odd programs that are clearly targeted, are being closely monitored. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but the reality is that it is way better than it was 15 years ago. I'd like to make one small statistic.
All right.
When the British left us, the average life expectancy was 30 years. Now it's about 70 years. I would like to ask that NGO who created the report, and frankly, I don't know who's funding these NGOs. A lot of NGOs have been funded to attack the US, to attack India, in particular, to attack democracy. I don't know where the funding is coming from, but these results seem a little agenda-driven to me. I mean, can you have that increase in the average life expectancy if you have this kind of starvation and hunger and poverty across the country? The two just don't go together. Just as the smooth growth of the minority population in India, the smooth growth is in complete contrast to the horror stories about India peddled by these same NGOs, and who never look at the fact that minorities are disappearing in Pakistan, they have disappeared in Afghanistan, and they are on the verge of sharply getting downsized in Bangladesh. They don't talk about that. They talk about India, where the minorities are a proud, active and growing segment of our population.
And in fact, IFPRI, which used to earlier publish this report, it has many funders. They've listed the names on their website. Very, very interesting, also to note that India was one of the funders in 2017 of IFPRI, which has published this, which used to earlier publish the GHI reports. But, talking about the other reports, because they also need to be highlighted, don't they, Gautam Mukherjee? The World Health Organization report that spoke about, poverty alleviation. Then you have this UNDP report clearly showing how India is forging its way forward, reducing, the poverty, the level of poverty which existed in our country with each passing year.
Yeah, there is no doubt. One is a in-depth report to a great extent, and the other is a little hatchet job that it doesn't bear, even looking at, because you cannot judge on that kind of basis. Somebody did a political poll on the basis on which the hunger report was written. you would throw it out, saying that, look, either do this properly or just opinionate on your own. You might as well, because that's all it's worth. So that India is going places, and that this government is highly committed to lifting up the poor is a given now.
Correct.
I don't think anybody in his right mind can challenge that. And therefore, if we are growing and if we are committed to the poor, there's only one thing that's going to happen. We're going to do well.
Right, and this report is only a testimony of the same. We're running out of time, so I'll take one quick question from Sharad Kohli and Joyita. Sharad, should we look at this report also, very cautiously, considering it talks about, poverty alleviation before the COVID period? How do you view, this report, considering that there can be, of course, an economic impact of coronavirus? Perhaps, do you think that if another assessment is made, these figures could change?
I agree with you, Meenakshi, because two aspects of this report I'll very quickly highlight. One, it says 90% of the people of the poor come from the rural areas. So I think with 60 to 70% of our economy being directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture, I think that is a matter of alarm, because you need to bring this sector into profit without a doubt. And the only second thing I wanted to highlight is that it has listed down 10 most backward states, or 10 most poor states, shall I say, which includes Bihar, Jharkhand, Meghalaya, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. I think that regional imbalance needs to be corrected, because if we are inviting investment here, if we want balanced growth of the country, we need to remove these regional imbalances before somebody notices and reverses the decision to set up in India.
Very pertinent point which you make, and something to ponder on. Joyita, last word to you, and we didn't touch on the politics of it because it doesn't seem very palpable, but end of the day, the traditional voter of the BJP has mostly been the urban voter. Now with poverty alleviation, very, very clear, these reports only a testimony of how DBT and other schemes, are being very well implemented by the government. That's one of the reasons why we are seeing the sort of poverty alleviation. Do you think that BJP could gain electoral benefits also out of the same, because it's coming right before the 2024 polls as well?
I don't see a particular report how it, how it can benefit any particular political party.
Okay.
Because ultimately, as it is said, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and it will be the poor people, if they are getting the benefits, if they think that their lives have kind of improved, then they will vote for BJP. Although at the same time, when you are talking about BJP's voters being primarily urban, I think it is starting to go beyond that, because if you look at the recent UP elections for that matter, they did pretty well even in the urban rural areas. And let's not also forget, a lot of this rural population also tend to converge to urban areas for the sake of livelihood. So I think gradually, to a large extent, and many of these people go back to the rural areas and they start voting. So that demarcation, that watertight compartments also do not exist anymore.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about this report, I don't see how it is going to affect, because if you go to Bihar, for example, if Bihar has been able to eliminate a lot of poverty, the 70% or whatever they are talking about, then that benefit is definitely going to go to Nitish Kumar and company. So it has nothing to do, it's all about governance and delivery. Whichever government governs properly and takes care of the people, they will win, and whoever doesn't, they will not win. Simple as that.
All right, fair point. Whether it's going to have any political ramifications or not, end of the day, this report is a clear testimony of how well India is doing. The UNDP report saying that multidimensional poverty has been reduced in the country. 140 million Indians have been pulled out of poverty in the last 15 years itself, clearly showing how India is on the path of development with, of course, the World Health Organization report and this latest UNDP report also saying that India is doing very well when it comes to poverty alleviation. Certainly a moment for us to celebrate, but also, of course, at the same time, to think of how we can completely eradicate poverty, even though it sounds utopian perhaps in our country at some day or the other. That's the food for thought I leave the viewers with. For now, I thank all the panelists to join us on this extremely interesting and riveting conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.